So I wanted to welcome you to SILS Connections. This is our first virtual alumni programming event that we've had, and we have more this week that we hope we see you at several of these events. But for right now, I wanted to thank Hillary Fox for joining us for our first presentation on things I wish I had known about reference and instruction jobs. So I will turn it over to Hillary. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. Also, when I was advertising the Obama graduation, my screen was only showing that Lenny was here, but I realized there's quite a few others, so I hope you attend as well. But like all of these Zoom calls right now, can I get a thumbs up if people can hear me and see my screen okay? All right, we're off to a great start. Okay, well, welcome. I'm going to turn off my video and hop into this. So as Lori said, SILS Connections are doing these various sessions throughout the summer. And this one is sort of speaking from experience as well as a professional on things I wish I had known about applying for the reference and instruction jobs. So you might be wondering at this point, what makes me qualified to talk about this? Well, some background, I graduated SILS in 2014. I had a science background and I graduated UNC in 2012 with that degree and then went to SILS after that. I have 5+ years of experience within reference and instruction and collection development, all within the sciences. And I've also served on multiple search committees. So that's been really helpful because as I gained more experience, I could talk with more seasoned librarians and also hear from these search committees mistakes that they commonly saw, people coming in for instructor level positions or new graduate students. And I really wanted to share this information with you all. So the focus for today, I'm only planning on talking maybe 15-20 minutes at you all about the general life cycle of the application process for reference and instruction. So first we're going to begin with some general tips, and then we're going to go over some tidbits from the application process to the phone/on-campus interview to getting the offer, and then to what your first days or first months might look like on the job. So if I say anything that's confusing, please feel free to stop me or chat, but we are going to also give you all plenty of time to ask whatever questions you would like. And let's keep this informal. Don't feel intimidated to ask these questions. We're all here to help you. Okay, some general tips. As you are applying for jobs, always do your homework about the institution, the library, and the job you're applying for, because this will help you figure out if it's a place that you want to be, but it'll also help you articulate how you can fit in with this position. And when I say do your homework, I mean look at the library's website as well as the universities. Look up annual reports from both the university and the library. It's good to make sure that the university's annual report mentions the library in it somewhere. Also read the mission statements of both of these and similar documentation, or even looking through the LibGuides of the library website can be really helpful. And a lot of times I'm seeing more and more, especially on the phone interview, you'll get a question that says, how did you prepare for this interview? And if all you say is, I read the job description and Googled where this place was, that's really not going to cut it. But saying things that you read all this documentation and that you thought clearly about this position, that carries a lot of weight. The next thing, as recent grads, you're looking for library positions, which in academia are almost always considered faculty positions. So you need to know that this really encompasses 3 different areas, and that's scholarship, professional development, and service. So scholarship means, what do I want to research? What are some things I want to try out? Professional development is like, what conferences do I want to go to? What organizations do I want to be a part of? And then service is, what nationwide, statewide, or maybe opportunities are there to serve locally on the campus that I'm a part of. So just kind of keep all those in mind. And you also will see questions on what is the difference between faculty and a staff position. And I would say a really solid answer is describing scholarship, professional development, and service. And then especially right now, since we're kind of remote for the foreseeable future, think about how you would work with online learners. Like, what technologies would you want to try? What approach would you want to go with it? Online learners, I think, has become a natural part of instruction jobs anyways, but especially right now. So if you're not sure about what to do with online learning, look up some articles, look at the ACRL website, and I could also send out some suggestions for listservs to subscribe to, and you can just chat with other librarians about it as well. Lastly, in terms of general advice, I think one of the biggest things that can be frustrating during this process is that faculty jobs can take forever to hear back from. And that's just because the committee all has to be organized to meet at the same time with so many different schedules. It can be a little hectic. So if you apply and you don't hear anything for maybe a month and a half, that is normal. I remember with my first job after SILS, from my application to my and to my offer, it took about 3.5 to 4 months. So don't get discouraged. It can take a while, but you also have every right after the phone interview or the on-campus interview to say, oh, what timeline are you all looking at for getting back to applicants? That's a perfectly normal question. Okay, so now you kind of have some general advice. Let's talk about the actual application. So I would suggest only applying for jobs that you're qualified for and genuinely interested in. When I say genuinely interested in, you might be at that position for a little while, so you want to make sure that it's at a place that you can see yourself and that you are doing duties that you think you would enjoy for an extended period of time. So that's where doing your homework also comes in, because you can see how this position would fit in with the university and how that position fits in with the library. And when I say qualified, this is a mistake that I made when I was first applying that I've also seen some newer librarians make as well. But when we say qualified, if a posting says we want you to have 3 to 5 years of professional experience, and let's say you've only worked at a library as a graduate assistant or maybe in another paraprofessional role, you don't get to add up all that time and say, well, if I put together all these part-time hours, it might equal 3 years. If they say 3 to 5 years experience and you don't have any professional faculty library experience, they're probably going to push your application to the side and hold out for a candidate that has more of that professional experience. So look for positions that say that say they're looking for introductory level librarians or great for new grads. Those are definitely the ones that you want to go out for, unless you have teaching experience prior to SILS, like as an adjunct or something. Getting back to doing your homework, write a unique cover letter for each application that actually addresses the job postings. The strongest cover letters that I've seen are the ones where they clearly went through the core duties of the job and then described how they can match each of those within their cover letter. That also makes it a lot easier too for the search committee reading your application if you draw those connections directly for us. All right, so going back to making sure that you're qualified, there's a bit of a caveat to this. You don't have to be an expert in every single thing about the job. Of course, you want to know how to do the core duties and have competency in those, but if you can also articulate how you would get up to speed and the trainings and the workshops and all these different approaches that you would take to achieve mastery over these other requirements for the job, those are really good answers as well. I'm thinking specifically with subject specialist positions. You don't need to have a master's in engineering in order to be an engineering librarian. But if you can tell the search committee how you would become familiar with engineering practices and standards, as well as trends within engineering, that holds so much weight. So if you are interested in becoming a STEM or an engineering librarian, but that's not your background, but you're still interested, I would say definitely apply, but make sure you articulate how you would get up to speed with these things. And then one thing that I did not learn at SILS, or possibly I did and then just forgot, but there is something called the ACRL framework, and that is a guideline for information literacy librarians on how to evaluate students, as well as what skills they should be gaining with instruction. So if you've never heard of that, I would just encourage you to look at it, because as an instruction librarian, this will come up, especially once you're on the job. Okay, are we okay so far? Are there any questions? Lori, has anything popped up in the chat?
Yes, Hillary, we do have a couple questions in the chat. Thank you for
Yeah.
breaking. We had a question from Katie. Would the idea of qualifying how you're going to catch up to speed, would that be something to best save for an in-person interview, or is that best to address in a cover letter?
I would say both, because if you don't address oh, it should come naturally in the cover letter, I should say, because you want to say why you're interested in the position to begin with. And then you can even throw sort of the caveat maybe in the last paragraph. Like, I realize that that my CV might not look as strong in this area, but here are the things that I would do, and here's how I would do that at your specific institution and your specific library. So I think customizing it to their needs would also be really beneficial. So yes, I would bring it up in both places, but then when you do the phone interview, or the in-person, however that library works, make sure that that's where you elaborate on that as well. Did that answer your question, Katie?
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. We also had, Lenny had a few exclamation points when you were talking about how to add up experience. I think that sometimes graduate assistant positions give some experience. I think you did a nice job there with the 3 to 5, because that usually is the breaking point of when they're thinking you've had a previous professional position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, all of my colleagues, we all applied for those 3 to 5. And I was at the EPA, and everyone that I worked with, we all did those 3 to 5. In our heads, we thought we were qualified, but they really wanted somebody with those years of experience.
Now, Lenny had a follow-up about, could the 3 to 5 consider non-library work experience as part of your background if you worked before you came back to SILS?
My question, so that I can answer that question more appropriately, was the work within higher education or in libraries or teaching as an instructor somewhere?
I think it was in editing specifically, right, Lenny? I don't want to speak out of turn. So yes, I'm getting the thumbs up from that. So not necessarily higher ed, but certainly parallel organizations.
Yeah, so when I've been on a search committee, we treat that as someone who is still new to librarianship. There can definitely be some crossover between that previous work and librarianship, but librarianship in itself is different. But that's also a really great opportunity if you think that you truly do qualify for that higher level of experience based on your previous work, to articulate what those crossovers are.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, should I keep going, and then we'll take more questions as they come in? Perfect.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So the next little bit is the interviews. So typically those occur in 2 stages, on the phone and then an in-person. But in terms of hiring right now, I'm not quite sure what they're doing. But it's typically like a 30-minute meet and greet, make sure you have the basic skills, and then something much more elaborate over a day or 2 for the in-person. But for the phone interview, they're going to ask you why you're interested in this job, or for you to tell them about yourself. I see a lot of people get stumped up on the question, tell us about yourself. And they think, well, do they want professional, or do they want like anecdotal, like fun stuff to get to know me? And the answer is, it's a test. They really want to see what your professional qualifications are. And within that question, they want to hear why you want this job specifically and how your professional career fits into that. And in the event that you don't get a question that asks why you're interested in this job or why you're the best candidate, make sure that by the end of the interview that you have found a way to put that into the interview. And if you get to the very end and you realize that you're all about to say goodbye and thank you, a great strategy is to say, hey, I realize that you all have a lot of, competitive candidates applying for this position, but, I could bring a lot to this position because of X, Y, Z, and then to say thank you for your time. So make sure that you really get that zinger in there and really your elevator pitch at some point. Typical questions that you'll get for the phone and the person interview is you'll get a lot of questions about, describe a time you collaborated, a time when you were innovated, successes or struggles. How would you manage faculty outreach as a liaison? How do you foster relationships? Like a lot of stuff for team building and critical thinking. As far as the question, when they ask you to describe a time that something didn't go right or a time you had a struggle, make sure that you're answering with something professional. I've seen people say things where they try to install a beaded curtain or airplane or make paper airplanes for a display. And while those are fun and, they make the person more personable, it doesn't help the search committee assess how you would manage conflict in the workplace or the changing dynamic nature of academic libraries. Also, as you're giving your response to these, make sure you're giving practical examples as much as you can. And the reason for that is because when you describe classroom projects or group projects, those are in a controlled, safe environment that are structured. But with these questions, they really want to see how you're going to be on a day-to-day basis, so how you're going to be out in the wild. So as much as you can, try to give those practical answers. But if you're in a situation where you just don't have a ton of that practical experience yet, this would be a great opportunity to really admit to say, that's an area that's new to me, but here's how I would approach doing it. So they can still see that you're thinking about the position and how it would fit in. At some point within the interview process, you're going to get a question on, describe a current issue within research or a current issue within reference. So I would say Google a hot topic or a trend in information literacy beforehand to just have it in your back pocket in case that comes up. Again, a quick Google search or even going to ACRL, that organization's website, and just seeing what they're talking about and how the issue is currently being addressed. Just having that in your repository in case it comes up can be really beneficial. And a hot one right now would certainly be e-learning tools and technologies for remote learning. Let's see. Lastly, because you're doing instruction and reference, assessment is going to be a huge part of the job. So know how to talk about assessment. How would you do assessment? What are some strategies that you would take? How would you form faculty relationships and assess those faculty relationships? If this is something that is a little bit new to you, ACRL has a ton of great information on it. And I'm also happy to stick around after or maybe set up a separate Zoom call if anyone wants to talk about that a little more. Okay, then I'm going to walk through the interview on campus and I'll pause again for questions. Or Lori, do we have anything pressing coming in right now?
We are clear right now.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're almost there. So for your interview on campus, you will almost always be asked to do a demonstration. And this is to do a mock information literacy session for a class or talk anything about your pedagogical practice, or they might just say do a presentation on anything that you want. And the big thing with this is you need to tailor your lesson to the context of that university. So look and see what their big classes are. Look and see if they have syllabi online where you think you could integrate information literacy or library instruction into it. And as part of this, to tailor it directly to that library and that institution, ahead of time, make sure you ask for login credentials so that you can use their databases and your resources for the presentation. And by getting these credentials ahead of time, that also allows you to practice using those resources ahead of time as well. And like I mentioned on the first slide, you will see a lot of overlap between the phone and the on-campus, but you are going to talk a lot about outreach, how you would get up to speed in a certain job, and how you would see yourself in this role. So again, that's why doing that homework is really important. And something that I wish I had done, and I think that every new librarian says after a few years, is that we all wish we had asked about what the funding situation was like for a library and how supportive the dean or director or maybe the department head was for professional development projects. And the reason for this is because, especially as a newer librarian, you want to make sure that you're able to travel to conferences or events that'll help you learn more. And maybe you have an idea for a pilot project and you want to make sure that your department head is going to be supportive of you going, and that also maybe you need money to conduct that project. So it's always good to have in mind the answer to that question, because that'll also tell you if this is a collaborative place where they're open to change and innovation, and those are really some key things you want as a newer librarian. And lastly, for the on-campus, you will be repeating yourself so many times for all the different groups that you're going to meet with. You'll get your schedule ahead of time, so they'll tell you who you're meeting with, so you can look up information about those people specifically. But they're all going to ask you, tell us about yourself and why do you want this job? So by the time you meet with that last group, it's basically going to be the final show. So everything up to that will almost be a dress rehearsal. Okay. And as you are going through this interview, whether it is the phone or the in-person, don't forget you're interviewing them too. And a really great strategy that I've seen is when the interviewees come to ask questions at the end of their session, after the search committee gives an answer to that question, it's really nice to see the interviewee sort of circle back and say how they see themselves fitting in with the response to that question. So it's really ending things on a positive note, and that'll definitely stick in the minds of the people interviewing you. And something that I see all the time that makes me cringe, and if you've been kind of like walking around and, checking in and out of this webinar, please come back to this slide. At no point ever ask something to the effect of, based on this interview, do you have any reservations about hiring me? I don't know why, but on so many job sites where they give you suggested questions to ask, this is always on there. This puts the search committee at a really awkward position because one, they haven't had time to really debrief about how the interview went, or maybe if it didn't go great, you're really putting them on the spot. But a lot of times search committees are held to confidentiality and they cannot discuss any of this information with anybody until an offer is made. So if you were thinking about asking this, cross it off your list and we can come up with another question for you. Okay. Now I want to hop into the offer in the next days, or the first few days of the job. But are there any more questions?
I don't see any more on chat right now.
Okay, cool. So the offer. One thing that I wish I had done with my first job is asked for more. Even if you love the offer and they're giving you the salary that you had hoped for, it is still okay to ask for more. They're not going to revoke the offer if you decide to go up in your pay and ask for a little more money. As a matter of fact, one thing that I really encourage women to do, especially just because women historically do not ask for more money when they're given an offer, is just ask for more money. See what they say. Worst they can say is no. And if that's the case, then you just get the salary they originally offered you. But that's also a really good way to help decrease the wage gap that's going on. Or at least one strategy. So regardless of who you are, even if you like the offer, ask for more. Make sure that they're giving you moving expenses if you're traveling across multiple state lines. Again, just asking for it if it's not mentioned in the initial offer. Worst they can say is no, and that's okay. Something that I think everyone should do is ask about what kind of technology is issued with the position. I think something really helpful can be asking for a laptop that is permanently issued out to you while you work there can be helpful, because then you can go, you can take it to meetings with you, or if you do sort of a traveling reference librarian role, or maybe you want to go meet with students in the student union, it can be really handy to take that with you as well. And lastly, take your time deciding. When they make you an offer, you don't have to decide right then and there. Or maybe you're in a situation where you have another interview in a couple of days. You want to see how that pans out. You can ask for a little bit of time, or you can even be upfront with the person making the offer and say, hey, I have an interview coming up in a couple of days, and I want to make sure I explore all my possibilities to find the best fit. Could I let you know after that happens? And I've never heard of a director saying no or anything like that.
Hillary, we did have a question about a reasonable amount to ask for more. And I think this was in reference to salary, not moving expenses. So correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but.
Yeah. So in terms of salary, the first thing I would do is it really depends on the region of the country that you're looking in, as well as the state. So there are a couple things you can do. First is look at the average, university librarian salary for that state. And you can find that on Google. In terms of how accurate that information is, I'm not 100% sure, but you're all librarians now. You know how to critically think about this, right? But then also a lot of states, especially if it's a state-funded school, so public schools, they will list the salary of their faculty online. And that's located in different places, but if you look up like UNC system salaries, you can enter a person's name, and then you can see what your peers are making and also sort of base it off of that. My rule of thumb, I've only ever worked in the South, so I typically ask for 3,000 to 4,000 more than what I'm offered, which I expected to get a no, but at least they're, that gives the image that I view myself as valuable and the other person will see myself as valuable too, and they tend to come up a little bit.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Were there any other ones?
We just had another one. What kind of language would you recommend using to ask for a higher salary, and how do you frame that question?
Yeah, so I like to do sort of a compliment sandwich, so to speak, where you acknowledge how great the offer is, and compliment them on how generous it is, and you're really excited about this opportunity, and then come in and say, but based on this reason and this reason, I was hoping for a little bit more, and then say your number, and then sort of ask them, like, what do you think? Because the person that you're talking to, they're a person too, and they're usually quite friendly because they want you to come work for them. That's why they're making the offer. And even if you don't have a firm reason, saying something like, I saw that other librarians in the area are making this amount, or in some cases, and whether or not this is true, this is up to you. You can say, I've been talking to other institutions and here's the offer that they're making me. That way it puts a little competition behind it as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And Lori, does all this sound right to you? Does it?
Yes, it rings
Okay.
very true. Yes, you're right. I love the compliment sandwich idea. I think that's very powerful. So it's not, especially when you're new at negotiating, you don't want it to seem aggressive. So I like that approach.
Right. Yeah, and I'll admit, even as you get more experience doing the negotiation, it can still be terrifying. So what I did was I talk it out loud with somebody, kind of do like a little bit of a role play just to get the words together. So I sound confident and pleasant while doing it. So I definitely would recommend doing that as well. All right, so now we're looking at, hooray, you've got the job, you negotiated, you got the salary you wanted and the moving package. So now you're on to your first days and then what will turn into your first months of the job. So make sure you ask plenty of questions. Your coworkers will probably come to you the first few weeks asking what you need help on, but the thing is no one knows that you need help until you ask it. So it is completely fine to ask questions about anything and everything. Some good examples might be, especially for instruction, is ask if they have outlines of courses that they've done that they can share with you, or ask if maybe the predecessor for your position, if they left outlines behind so that you can use those just while you get settled. And as part of this, also meet with everybody in your department or around the library that you think you might come across with in your day-to-day duties, and just hear them out for what they do with their job, ask them questions, see what advice they can give you, and just really soak in all of that information. And as I've mentioned several times throughout this, when you're in a reference and instruction position, you're going to be a liaison typically for different departments, or if it's a smaller school, you'll be in charge of all the library faculty outreach. So go ahead and start emailing faculty or departments and say that, hey, I'm new, I'm excited to get to know you, to hear what your needs are, and to talk to you a little further. So getting in on departmental meetings of teaching faculty or maybe individuals just to hear what's going on, and that's a chance for you to do your pitch as well and say, here's how the library can help. And right now I think Zoom makes this a little bit easier, because you could even phrase it as, hey, can you meet for like a 15-minute, virtual coffee break? And then that kind of puts a time on it. So if you're really nervous talking to them, all you have to do is 15 minutes. And lastly, do more listening than talking within the first few months. If you have great ideas, absolutely feel free to share them, but also realize that you're coming into a brand new space that has an established culture and maybe an established process. So it's important to get to know why that culture exists, why things are done the way that they do, before you necessarily hop into wanting to make big changes. All right, well, those are the big things that I've noticed, at least common mistakes that I've seen newer interviewees make, as well as mistakes that I've made over the past. I hope that you all found some of this helpful, but I would definitely like to hear what questions you all have at this point, or even walk through scenarios.
Hillary, we had one chat question that said, this might be related more to the interview, but how would you even find out if this position had a predecessor?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, so it really depends on the institution, I think, because sometimes on the library website, they might have like the role listed. And like, so it'll say like the title, but then it'll say vacant, have a little gray square where someone's picture should be. But in the phone interview, that could be a really great question to ask. You could say, was someone in this role previously? Is this a new position? And then you can also try to get some information on perhaps why the position is now open, which can also help you figure out, did the person leave because it was a bad situation, or did they leave on good terms, like with their retirement or something like that?
Great. We have a few questions coming in terms of figuring out personal backgrounds and how that relates or how that would be seen on an academic library search committee. The first one is any insight on how a committee would view someone with 5 years of full-time, fairly advanced paraprofessional experience in an academic library regarding the 3 to 5 experience requirement?
Yeah. And it can really depend on what the specific position is, and what that library's needs are. But I will say, within my experience, even though you might have that really extensive paraprofessional experience, there's still like a big difference between the work that staff is doing, which is the day-to-day stuff, whereas the faculty position, so the librarian roles, are doing a lot of research, scholarship, and service to the university and things like that. So they would likely prefer you to start at an instructor level role. So I don't want to say that 3 to 5 years is a wash then, because that would devalue all the great experience that you have, and that is not the case at all. But I would say, if you think that you are a strong candidate, apply, because I think what the expression is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So at most, just apply, and if you don't get a call back, that's okay. But I would say, just based on my experience, they would still probably prefer that person to be in an instructor role without having that professional experience.
Okay, thank you. We had another person on the call who worked as faculty in an English department for 2 years that had deep focus on research and collaborating with the library. Would this count as experience the academic libraries find valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any prior teaching experience for an instruction or reference job, whether that was an adjunct or a faculty member in a completely outside department of the library, that still comes in handy, because you are familiar with pedagogy and implementing it and also assessing it. But you would just want to make sure that you articulate how those skills translate into librarianship.
Oh, you worked yourself right into the next question, which is, what is a good way to professionally address reservations that the committee might have about your application?
Yeah, so what I typically do, and I'll turn my video back on now, I think a good way to address that is on the phone interview. Either bring it up at the end or at the beginning when they tell you about yourself. But I think the important thing to do is just slip it in there somehow. And especially if you've gotten to the end and you haven't had a chance to really clarify that for anybody, definitely sneak it in there. So for example, when I applied for this position at NC State, I had just moved into the head of the reference department role at my previous institution, just because it opened up and I wanted that experience. So that might look really fishy to someone who was hiring a new person who had been in a current leadership role for 3 months. Why are they trying to leave? What's going on? Is it a bad experience? Are they being kicked out? So I just made sure, at the beginning, when I was talking about myself and why I was interested in this job, I said it has all of these great things, but also let me take a minute to acknowledge this slightly awkward thing, and here's why I'm leaving this other job. Did
And
that
it
help?
worked.
I realized I just rambled a little bit. Sorry. Yeah, it did
No,
work.
no.
So
I think we are caught up on chat questions. So if people feel comfortable, I can still read out chat, but we also, I think you have the opportunity to unmute yourself as well.
yeah, absolutely. I'll leave my contact information up here too in case you're nervous about asking a question or you just want to ask questions about the process as you start to go through it. I'll be here for a while, so you'll be able to get in touch with me.
Good to hear.
I'm also actually wearing the same outfit in my picture as I am right now.
Look at that.
So yeah, I want to make sure you guys
That
can
was
recognize
smart.
me.
Someone asked, when looking at applications, what are some things that stand out?
Yeah. So when looking at applications, so your application is typically going to be your CV and then your cover letter. I think, oh gosh, I'm trying to think what we've done. So we first look to see if you've met the basic requirements. So do you have your ALA or a degree from an ALA accredited institution? And then do you have the level of professional work experience that we've asked for? And again, we've addressed that professional could mean faculty positions and other capacities, not just library faculty positions. And then we look to see that your cover letter, so we're actually going through and reading these, that it addresses what all of the core duties are of the position and also expresses why you want this position. And so as I'm talking about this, I want you all to recognize that the CV and the cover letter are two very different things. CV is just saying, here's my previous experience and here's what the duties were of these positions, whereas your cover letter should say how those duties have helped you do everything that is required for the duties of the job you're applying for. So it shouldn't just be a repeat of your CV.
That's a great suggestion. That's a hard concept for people to first think about because it seems like they're very similar, but I think the weaving together on a cover letter of why you want this new role is harder to do, but gets the point across better.
Yeah, and I think one of the nice ways that I've seen things phrased between the CV and the cover letter, as you write your cover letter, is saying something like, I see that you are looking for somebody who's familiar with online technologies for the classroom. You could say, well, in my experience previously, here's some of the different things that I use, and I would like to continue doing that and to, you know, grow and learn more through this position. So it's not a repeat of the CV, but it integrates the CV into that cover letter, and then you elaborate past that.
Okay, when some of the online application portals ask for a resume upload, do you think they mostly want CVs?
That one, I've seen the language change between resume and CV, and I'm not sure if whoever else might watch this, if they would jump on me, but quite frankly, we don't care. So whatever
That's what
you
I tell
have.
people all the time.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that because I think
Okay.
it's whatever you've developed, that's your, yes, there is fundamentally a difference between the two, but like you said, on the other end, they're going to take whatever you've offered.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and if it's okay, before we hop to the next question, I want to back up a little bit to the person who asked, what do you look for? So I mentioned a lot for the cover letter, making sure that you identify exactly how you can fit all those duties in, but also transfer some of that language into your CV. So if it says like proficiency in the ACRL framework, then on your CV, make sure that you have implemented the ACRL framework in different information literacy sessions. So just make sure like some of the language kind of aligns with each other. It makes it easier for the reader to get through it.
Okay, another question is, do you have any recommendations specifically for people graduating with an MSLS during COVID-19 hiring freezes? What can we do at this time that sets us up for positions? What general recommendations do you have? Oh, Okay, I'm sorry. I think they just repeated the first sentence, got cut off, but that's the gist
Okay.
of it.
Yeah, that is an interesting question, and quite frankly, one that mentors are still trying to figure out. This is completely unprecedented, and we're not quite sure. Um, but I would say I'm trying to look at this as like that period to where maybe you still haven't gotten a job offer yet, like over like an extended summer, you haven't gotten calls quite yet, but you're applying to things. I would say continue to do professional development. So whatever type of instruction or reference role you want to get into. They have subject-specific databases or subject-specific organizations. ACRL has a ton of subgroups that you can subscribe to. Um, Sign up for those listservs because they will often put out webinars or share articles with each other or things like that. And I think taking advantage of those to, like, one, keep your mind fresh on current issues, but that is certainly a way to occupy your time and to build up your professional development resume as you go through things. And that's also a great place to email other librarians and say, hey, I just graduated. Like, what suggestions do you have? And it tends to be a really supportive community that sends out those responses. Which that doesn't like help things right now, but that's, we're working with a really weird circumstance at this time.
Yes, I think things I've been telling students is that their expertise and background are not going to just dissipate over the next 90 days. It's still going to be there. And in addition to professional development, which I think is a great idea, connecting and networking with other future colleagues could also be, in some respects, people have a little bit more freedom to maybe take a 15-minute Zoom coffee call now. So to not forget that part too.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because a good way to go about that, if there's a specific type of library role you're interested in, you could look and see like maybe who in the triangle has a role like that and say, hey, are you interested in giving advice to a new grad on what to do? Or if there's an institution that you would really like to work out, maybe reach out to some of those people so that way at least has, your face will be on their radar at some point. But yeah, people like they're more than happy to like meet and talk to new graduates. We were all in that situation at one point, and we want to see each other succeed.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more. Yes, I don't see any more questions. There was a follow-up to that last one about not wanting to be intrusive during a crisis time for them. And I do understand that people can be at different points, but so do you have any suggestions, Hillary, if someone was reaching out to you as a new grad for this 15-minute coffee break type thing, how would they ask that would balance that respectfully?
So how would the person asking for the meeting balance that? Yeah, I think it's
Yes.
fair. Okay. Yeah, I think it's fair to acknowledge, like, I realize this might be a hectic time for you, but if you have any availability and like give them a time from like over the next 2 weeks, don't expect a meeting that day or the next day. And really, just try to be on their schedule, I think. And if for whatever reason, the person that you're speaking to just doesn't have the bandwidth to do that, they might automatically refer you to somebody else or say, hey, are you interested in talking to this person? Or they'll say, I'm so sorry, I just can't handle it at this time. And if that's the case, then, move on to the next person. But they won't be mean about it, so don't worry.
How fantastic are reference librarian applicants expected to be about having instruction experience?
Yeah, so if you're applying for an instructor level position, so when you look at like the rank of professorship, it goes like instructor, assistant, associate, full. So the intro level, or rather the instructor level librarian positions, those are sort of at the bottom of the growth ladder. And the search committee, they realize that you are coming fresh out of school. You might not be an expert or have a ton of experience in that aspect of the job. But I would say try to get like a little something, maybe like do like a couple of webinars, or like I think A lot of people did the community workshop series at the public library in Chapel Hill. Well, right now you can't do that. But I would say try to find just a couple of opportunities, but then, acknowledge that while that might seem like a deficit, here's all these ways that you will get up to speed. And here's all these opportunities that you saw at this specific institution and this library that you would like to take advantage of. So yeah, that's why doing the
Great.
homework is so important.
Great. We actually have some CWS alums on the call. So
Oh,
thank you for
great.
including
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, these are all really great questions. And I know it's really hard right now and probably frustrating, but we will get there. And also keep in mind that with job applications, when it rains, it pours. So you might not hear anything for a while, and then you might have a week where you have 4 phone interviews.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, that's what I wish for everyone on this call.
Yes. Well, I think unless there's any more questions, we'll probably wrap up. Any last call for any questions with Hillary? And again, she was kind enough to put up her contact information, and I know she's been, oh, Hillary, can you take a minute to tell us about some of your professional development that you've done since leaving SILS?
Yeah. So professional development wise, I worked as the science librarian at the University of West Florida, which is in basically lower Alabama. If you're looking at a map, it's in that part of Florida. I was the sole science librarian, so I was the liaison for the STEM programs and health sciences, and did a lot of instruction. And I think one of my biggest achievements was launching an embedded librarian program with the School of Nursing that was there. So if you are looking for a hot topic to bring up in an interview, embedded librarianship is a big one for instruction and reference. And then through that, I also attended a lot of different conferences and webinars on different scholarly communications things, especially open education resources. I applied successfully and sometimes not to different grants and fellowships during that period too. And I received one for open education resources through the Open Textbook Network. So as you see calls for stuff like that coming out, definitely apply for them. It's a really great experience and connects you with a lot of people. And then I started at NC State University in September, whereas I'm one of the librarians for agriculture. And I'm still trying to get my footing in the kind of with where I'm going. So a lot of the advice that I made for the first days was based on my current situation. So I'm working with colleagues, getting recommendations on what organizations to join, what things I should be doing, getting help networking and meeting other people across the university. And I've also put my name forward for different committees across the state as well as the country.
And you've been kind enough to give back to the SILS Alumni Association as well.
Oh, that's right. I guess that's a big thing too. Yeah. So I am currently the vice president / president-elect, which means that in a couple of months, I will be the president of the SILS Alumni Association for a year. So you might see my face again. I hope that you all are joining and are actively involved in the Alumni Association. It's just a really great way to stay in touch and to hear about other things going on in the community.
Great, thank you. Well, at this point, I want to thank Hillary for taking the time today to kick us off on our SILS Connections. We really appreciate it. And for those of you attending the call, hopefully by the end of the week, you'll hear from me with a survey so we can get your feedback, because as Hillary and I were mentioning at the beginning of the call, we do want to keep this up. And we hope to have a midsummer and an early fall SILS Connections lineup that has different topics with different speakers, and we want to make sure we're reaching your needs. So please be on the lookout for that survey so you can give us your feedback, and I hope to see many of you later this week on other calls as well. But Hillary, the chat is filling up with thanks, Hillary, for your time, grateful for the information. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to meet you guys, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.